Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Christian Whistleblower channel. So glad to have you here. I'm coming to you live from the heartland of America, straight into your hearts, I hope. Tonight, I'm joined by a man that many of you know. We call him the Professor. His name is Robert Bauer. I saw him on Rocky Stucci's Situation Room. Very honored and privileged to have you with us here tonight, Robert. Thanks for joining us.
Well, the honor and privilege is mine, Jeff. I've enjoyed not only your stuff and obviously working with Rocky, but the consequential rapscallions is quite a fascinating participation.
Well, you know, Scotty Roberts is a true rapscallion, so it's pretty easy for him.
He covers for all of us.
He does. He does. It's awesome. So very nice to have you here tonight. I think we're going to have a wide-ranging discussion. So why don't you go ahead and jump right in. If I see a great question in the chat room, I'll jump in and give it to you. But go ahead and let us know what's going on. And Rocky has background envy already.
Uh-oh, here we go. I knew that as soon as he saw this, he'd go, how do I get one of those?
Yeah. But that wouldn't fit with the meatball. I mean, come on, it just wouldn't.
Well, maybe in a few years after he matures a little bit.
That's true. When he's more like a Don instead of a meatball.
That's right. When he improves the sauce that he puts into his meatballs.
Absolutely. I don't know. I've never sampled Rocky's cuisine, but that's coming up soon. I'll be up there to hang out with Rocky and Scotty before too many more days are out.
Well, yeah, I saw that. That looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. We had talked about
Absolutely.
getting up there and doing a round table on all kinds of things. And, you know, one of the things that I really enjoy with Rocky is, I mean, he's got an open mind, right? This guy will cover and talk about anything, whether he knows about it or doesn't.
But there's not much he doesn't know about. He surprises you.
I've been finding that out. And so it's been hard. Each show I've got to work up something new just to see if I can get him to at least say Star Trek.
Oh, I don't know if that'll ever happen.
Well, at least bring in a Star Trek reference.
Exactly.
So when we talked about, you know, some things to cover about, you know, trying to put together something that would be interesting. One of the things that I've been studying in the Informatica series that we've been doing is, you know, what is the content in the continuum? What is the information within those things? And there's some very interesting esoteric and exoteric information that relates to what we're seeing today, not only in just the way that people, in fact, there was a recent study that showed that people, the investment and the amount of time people are spending on psychics, on the psychic realm, on psychic phenomenon, has been going on an up ramp for the last 5 or 10 years. It may have some correlation to 2012 and a lot of the things.
That's amazing. I saw today, Robert, on Drudge that more people now, for the first time, more people believe in ETs than in God.
And that is a part of, I think, the evolutionary aspect of what happens when you get in more information.
I think it is.
The more information that you have about any given subject, the more interesting it becomes, the more fascinating and mysterious it becomes.
Right.
And what's, you know, there's a number of things going on that I find extremely independently very interesting, but also correlative. I mean, there's intersections, or I think the best way to use this term, intersectionality, that's being misused and abused and tossed around and weaponized in the social fabric right now. But that term, intersectionality, is something that I think everybody really experiences on some level, because we all have experiences that are completely out of bounds of what we've known and seen. And then we have the mundane on the daily. And we become conditioned with those experiences. And that's how we frame the way we look at things. Well, the way you look at things, especially when there are a whole bunch of really crazy, amazing things going on, is really important. Having critical thinking, being able to be just completely objective in your observation, being able to say, I have a feeling, I have a thought, but I'm willing to hear what, or see, or explore whatever this new data set might be.
Robert, can I stop you for a second there?
Sure.
Because I think most people would say, yes, that's where I want to get. Yes, that's what I do. Yes, that's what I want to be. But the fact of the matter is that almost no one that I know ever gets to a place of true objectivity. No matter, and if you think they're objective on the surface, or even if you think yourself is objective on the surface, probe a little bit. And if you go 2 or 3 layers deep, you're going to find that something where all of a sudden you're not objective about, but you're right back into the knee-jerk reactionary paradigm. And it's just, if someone really does want to get there, how do you recommend them getting there, unless that's a whole nother show?
I would say that's a whole nother show, but
right.
The fundamental thing is to always be self-examining. Why do
Absolutely.
you feel the way you do about whatever it is that has caused whatever reaction that you've had? And that gets to the point of, what is your reaction to anything?
Yep. And I think that's Rocky's strength. He does seem to be very objective to the core. It's like he's at the place where he's lived long enough, experienced enough, that he's like, hey, I don't know it all. I'm open to anything and everything. He has a great deal of mental plasticity, I think. And that's probably one of the Meatball's greatest strengths.
Yeah. And he also has that incredible emotional sensitivity and energy.
Absolutely.
Which when anything that he's exploring or thinking about, when it triggers that, it's amazing. It's authentic. And that's what makes, I think, people different from other people, depending on what the subject matter is, what you're looking at and listening to, and so forth. It's the context within which the content is actually going on, and that content that content is governed by whatever filters, whatever ideologies, whatever principles, ethics, morals, laws, however, pick any category that we humanly experience minute to minute, day to day. Any one of those are always subjected to whatever has come before it, how you were molded, what you were exposed to, what were your experiences, and how you manage them. The most important thing is to be self-aware, to have some self-examination of, why did I get pissed off at that?
Yeah.
Why did that person, and you hear this all the time, you hurt my feelings. Well, hold on a second. From a scientific perspective, I can't hurt your feelings.
Exactly right. You can't make me feel anything.
They come from within. They come from you. So somebody can't hurt your feelings unless you assist them or you allow them, right? And that's part of the conditioning as well.
It is.
I think that this whole idea of, people are talking about science, they're talking about quantum physics and about these new realms and this incredible technology that not only we have now, which if you took it back 100 or so years at the most, but if you showed somebody a smartphone, they would think it was magic.
Oh, they would.
Right?
They would. That's why I'm beginning to think, Robert, that the God of the Bible wasn't supernatural at all. He was just an advanced being with a lot better tech.
That is part of what is on the list of trying to connect some nuggets. And I want to throw some stuff out on the table that are things that I've gathered along my journey. People, they ask, well, how would you describe yourself? And I said, well, I am a energetic spiritual being having a human, physical, biological experience. And within that consciousness, I've been blessed or cursed, sometimes both, with an insatiable curiosity that lands and plays in an extremely overly fertilized imagination. So I'm curious about everything, and things, as we go through this technological and information age, where information that's been available for thousands of years, millennia, maybe even hundreds of thousands, which I kind of subscribe to, it was as important and fundamental back then, and even more so today, because
Absolutely.
I think everything goes in cycles. I think that what we see to your point about we were engineered essentially, and that's what the Sumerian writings talk about in the Enuma Elish. The Sumerian kings list goes back 200,000 or 300,000 years, and yet today in academia, and the people that are ascribe the officialdom and the orthodoxy of taking and categorizing and putting the framework around knowledge sets, we've been told that all this ancient stuff that is literally in every culture that we have currently uncovered and deciphered, they all talk about star beings, people from the clouds, somebody from up there dropped on in and dropped some nuggets of knowledge on us. And it's consistent, but we're told by the authorities that this is all those things are mythos. They are stuff that guys and people came up with from putting the wrong plants together in a meal and getting some really serious psychedelic effects. It just doesn't make any sense. And the more there are independent people like myself, like you, like Rocky, Scotty, John Ward, all of these independent researchers, people that have taken it upon themselves to go find the information, go look for themselves, not just take and adopt whatever somebody else has prepackaged for you. So it's kind of like it's kind of like having your own ranch and your own free range chickens, or you're going to go down and get the frozen ones at the grocery store.
That's so true. And I mean, so many of us that have a religious background, we're so used to believing what we're told, believing what the church fathers, the church elders, the pastors, the priests have told us, and giving them intellectual carte blanche because we believe that they're good men and good women and have only our best interest at heart. And the more we find out that the latter of that is not true, we begin to question the former and realize that, I mean, I remember the day when I realized that my Bible college teacher wasn't teaching me from his own personal experience, but from notes that were so old they were yellow and cracked. He was just teaching me what somebody else had taught him. I'm fifth, sixth generation, hand-me-down regurgitations, and that literally changed my life.
Yeah, and that my personal, at least on a religious experience, I was raised, half attending Methodist, in the fundamental Christian side of that belief system. And we didn't go to church much. My favorite memories of being involved in the church when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s in Los Angeles was going to Christmas so I could sing the songs.
Oh, bad. Well, it must have been something growing up in 1960s and 70s LA, back when LA was really paradise.
It was. I got to say, I've been fortunate to travel around the world. I've been on 4 of the 5 continents, and I have seen a lot of different stuff in different ways, and people live and their cultures and the way they have been climatized to the local genetics and the local regions. And I got to tell you, if I was going to tell anybody, they say, well, where and when would you want to grow up? Southern California in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
I was with Robert Stanley this weekend, and he would agree with you wholeheartedly.
It was a paradise. You're the mountains, the ocean, the deserts. I mean, the weather was, I'd moved there in 85 to Chicago. And friends would say, well, what's it like in Chicago? I said, well, besides the environmental shock, because it just all of a sudden there were seasons. We didn't.
Right.
We had godliness all season long in Southern California, and they still do. It's just messy. But the other thing was it was a cultural shock. I was completely blown away. All I knew was the original liberalism, if you will. And this is one of my pet peeves. I get on with these people that think that they're some kind of new age liberal or something. But back in the 60s and 70s, the original liberalism that I grew up in and participated and enjoyed in was exactly the opposite of what's going on today. Back then, we were anti-man. Today, it's like, well, it's only the man that can make it happen and make it work.
Isn't that something?
You sit there and you go, wait a minute. And the rest of it was, with the free love thing, that was amazing. I'll leave it there. And then, the rest of just, I mean, there was an idea, there was a philosophy in a sense, I guess. The cultural identity was, if you have anything that you can do it.
Right.
And there wasn't a whole bunch of people stifling you and telling you, you've got to do this, have these rules. I survived free range parenting, right? We didn't have phones or any of that. We went out at night. We knew when the street lights came on, depending on the time of the year, we had a half hour to be home, or that was it.
Yeah, same way. I left the house in the morning, didn't come back except maybe to eat lunch until it was dark. I heard my father had this whistle that he would do. And you heard that, and you better be almost at the porch by the time that whistle fades away, or there were bad things going to happen afterwards.
Yeah, my parents were born in Kansas and Oklahoma, so their parents moved out into Southern California in the 30s, late 30s, early 40s.
Oh my.
And so I had the best of what I would consider from being a traditionalist, or having an affinity for being a traditionalist mindset and ideology. I had the cornbread, pork, cauliflower feedings and thinking, and the way you made things happen planted right in the middle of this utopia called Southern California. I had to get, my ass was always contained. I was, they said, here's the rules and this is the way it worked, but get outside.
Right.
Go somewhere and do something, please. But when you do it, you must be responsible and accountable for your actions. Because if you screw something up, you're going to get a whooping when you get home.
Could you imagine turning your kids loose in SoCal today?
No, no, not without, unless they were, gave them a whole bunch of preparation before they, I'd let them loose. They'd be ninjas, probably. They would know how to take care of themselves. They would have all the survival skills, including being able to start a lawnmower, that these kids today don't.
Exactly. Just amazing stuff.
So to get into this, continue on and try to get into some of this subject, I found some nuggets that I find quite fascinating in their individuality as well as collectively, and how some of these things connect. And one of them is this thing that we talked about earlier in magic. Magic is something that, like a lot of different subjects, have been, packaged in certain ways and given certain aspects so that they are looked at by the majority of people, or thought about by the majority of people in certain ways. And magic is one of them, which is quite fascinating because magic is everywhere. Yet you won't get people to talk about magic, whether it's in various forms of the art and the craft. But when you think about it, in my perspective, in my experience, waking up is magic.
Oh, it is. It's alchemy.
Okay. Yeah. And when you look at the history and the tradition of magic and mystery schools and religions, there's some very interesting dots that are connected that I think people don't usually consider when they think about them individually. But when you think about them collectively, you get a different perspective. You get new information that you go, never really thought about it that way, but that sounds like it makes sense. So on the subject of magic, I must
please do
ingest some magic here known as hot chocolate.
Oh, hot chocolate.
I used to love it when I was a kid. Rediscovered it about 2 or 3 months ago. I found a box of it in my pantry. I went, what's this doing in here?
Try it out. Yeah.
I tried it out, and I've been going to Walmart buying the 30 pack every week. So let's talk about magic.
Let's talk about magic.
In magic, there are essentially 3 different ways in which it's typically thought about or defined, depending on your experience and your knowledge. There's fictional magic, which is things like Harry Potter, right?
Right.
Which is just, it's awesome. But if you look into the depths of the esoteric knowledge that goes into those books and the way that Rowling wrote them, she was obviously very well versed in the occult.
Absolutely. Right? And just like the Doctor Strange, the magic there's a lot of, you can tell people know something that have created those characters and write those scripts.
You would think so, because when you look into, was that shit real? You go, I see where they got that information and why they wrote the character, the story, and whatever around it.
And even something as campy as the Supernatural TV series, most of the time it's silly, but at least, once every month, twice a month, you're like, oh, somebody knows something.
That's exactly right. So you got fictional magic. Then you have fake magic, which is stuff like Houdini and what's his name? Chris Angel.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've seen some of these guys coming out of I think it's Asia Got Talent. There's a couple of guys, Eric Chen and Shim Lin. And these guys are pulling off some sleight of hand that is, it's as close to actual transformative alchemic type magic that I've ever seen.
And Angel's not a slouch. I've had an opportunity to spend some time with Angel, and there's some people that will still swear that he's using the dark arts, but I don't think he is. He's just, at least was up until about 5 years ago. I haven't kept track of him. Really, really good.
Well, isn't it interesting that on that accusation alone, doesn't it imply that there is a belief that the dark arts exist?
Absolutely.
Well, if the dark arts exist, then where do they come from? What do they do? What's the history? What is the essence of them? So
and here's something. Rocky's jumping the gun a little bit, but he says, in addition to saying that we have to have a hot chocolate intervention for you, he says, is sexual magic real magic? Asking for a friend.
He wants me to come back on the show because he knows I have that secret potion.
I would say yes, it is. It's certainly real direction of intention, which is the essence of magic. But
well, when you think about it, to me, again, if I'm an energetic, conscious being, and consciousness and energy are the things that make up all things, then everything has a vibration and a frequency. It has an energetic signature, right? And all of it interacts with other energy because it's all energy.
Right.
So everything, we are an instantaneous manifestation of thought and energy into the form that we are. So when we are doing that, when we are just being ourselves, that in and of itself is magic. I mean, nobody's explained it yet. With as far as all of this amazing science has come and what it has given us today, it's not the first time, by the way, in my opinion. I think we're going through one of those cycles where the Atlantean cultures that are typically referred to as Atlantean cultures got over their skis a little bit and maybe helped contribute to the end of their instance in the cycles within cycles. I think we may be approaching another cycle similar now.
Right. Robert, could you tell the non-skiers out there what getting over your skis means, what that allusion is to?
What that alludes to is it's a metaphor for many different examples of this, but you're going down a hill and you think you're really killing it and you're leaning out over your skis and you go too far and you're in a pile.
Right.
So you can get out over your surfboard, your skateboard, your motorcycle, your car, your boat, your plane, anything.
You can.
It's a matter of getting ahead way over what you're currently capable of handling.
And Stucci's over at getting out ahead of his keyboard right now. He says he's getting turned on right now and he can't explain it. So,
well, I don't think it takes much for Stucci to get turned on.
That's true. So he's got a low bar. Magic. We've got fake magic.
And then we have mental magic.
Ooh, I like it.
Okay. Now, mental magic is where this starts tying into both the mystery schools and religion, and it's going to tie into CAYCE, Atlantis, and the hot zone. So staying with the mental magic, and this is one of the things that I find, again, you look at it objectively, you stand back and you just look at what is the data of each. You find some very interesting correlations between science and religion as it relates to mental magic. Mental magic is something that happens within yourself. It's something that you typically would do you would desire something. You would have an intention to do something. So you have a thought, and that thought creates an energy pattern that then propels your biology and your physiology to go do something about it. Doesn't have to be that external. Mental magic can happen. It happens when you're sleeping, when you're dreaming, when you're thinking about something creative.
So are you implying that thoughts are things, Robert?
Absolutely, thoughts are things. How can they not? If indeed what I propose, and there's many people that are on the same path, that everything is consciousness and energy, then it doesn't matter what it is that you're thinking and doing. You are creating something. At a minimum, you're creating a thought. That thought is going to have some type of biological, physiological, psychological impact on the way in which you move forward from that thought.
And all of your thoughts are going to create something. So that's certainly something to keep in mind.
Exactly. And when you are somebody like the meatball, who's got some serious stuff going on in there, you can see those thoughts going in there. Some of them are leapfrogging each other. Some of them are slapping each other. Some of them are just going, shut up. I mean, they're all going on simultaneously.
Right.
And that in and of itself is a fascinating psychological study.
That's for sure.
So let's go back to this thought of magic and intention, the mental magic. When you think about it, the history of magic and the things like the, people going after wizards and shamans and witches and these people who were given some definition by enough other people that they had some skill that they were using in a not positive way. And or on the shamanic side, these people had some connection to the ether, to whoever managed whatever it is up there that makes what we are. They had a connection. It was like, hey, I know a guy.
I know a guy.
And I can talk to him for it. So depending on what the intention and the perspective of this mental magic was and is, people adhere to or at least conduct themselves in a way that's based on how they see this thing called mental magic. So, for example, you got the people we just talked about, historically have all kinds of amazing stories. Some of them, you've got, I can't think of the guy's name, but it was the Catholic priest that could levitate.
Oh, I can't remember him.
Thoroughly documented, news articles on for decades. I mean, just thousands of people saw this guy. He levitated. How did he do that?
I've seen a witch doctor levitate up to 6 feet high, by the way, in the middle of the jungle.
So there is something there that our current understanding in science has no explanation for, that it is rare, but it is documented, just like the UFOs and aliens and all these other things. But let's just stay with mental magic for a second.
Please.
Mental magic is something, as we've just kind of laid out, something that happens all the time with everybody. And there are extreme versions of it and examples and expressions in this side that we just talked about that have happened for a long time. Now, that same mental magic is based on intention. When you think about back in the Middle Ages, you had alchemy, which has now become chemistry, right?
Yep.
You had, and my argument is to the opposite side of this, but basically you had astrology that became astronomy. And I think that before astrology became astrology, it was astronomy, because unless you tracked all these lights and things going on in the sky, and then noticed whatever conjunctions, oppositions, correlations, cycles, whatever, whenever they came, because they come around in regular cycles. When they do, certain aspects and certain things have more of a tendency or a propensity to happen. That's why back in, and it's in all of the Western traditions of religion, a lot of people don't realize that reincarnation was in the original scriptures that eventually King James and the gang got together and, did their obfuscations and rewrites and all that. But there is a tradition of knowledge and information that has been throughout history consistent. And this is part of what we were talking about in the content and the continuum. So astrology became astronomy, herbalism became pharma, right? So this mental magic is something that has been around for a long time. We talked about things that are typically described as the negative side or the less than positive, the dark side. But on the light side, you have the exact same thing going on with mental magic. When you think about magic has, we talked about the fictional, we talked about the fake, and then this mental magic. Well, there's certain types of magic that are very consistent on either the dark or the light side. One is divination, right? So divination is like mirror gazing, sitting over a pot of boiling embers and looking into the future. Tarot cards, right? Divination is you're you're trying to look through across space and time, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
I just happen to have some divining rods here.
I love those things, man. They're great. You can use them for anything.
Absolutely.
Because what are you doing? You're just using energy and frequencies, and you're asking those things to sense them because you're thinking about it. You're creating the frequency that they are looking for.
I like it.
That's how they work to me. But you also, the second part of magic, so we got divination, then we have will, right? So will is something that you're trying to, you would like to force. You would like to create an intention and force that intention to happen. And then we have something that Dr. Dean Radin calls theurgy.
Theurgy.
Theurgy, okay? And theurgy is a combination of two Greek words, basically meaning God work,
right?
Or working with spirits.
Oh,
and, right. This is where Catholics, they have their Saint Christopher this, Saint that, Saint whoever for whatever day of the week and whatever underwear I'm wearing. I mean, they use these. They think of them as spirits, as other entities of energy, and they are asking them on their behalf to clean my underwear today, whatever it might be. Okay?
Right. So
those are the three types of magic, basically, that people do. Alchemy, everything in alchemy, and Newton was a major purveyor of this, and most people don't realize it, primarily because he had to keep it quiet because the Catholic Church ruled everything. And if they knew that he was doing alchemy and using his mental magic of intention to conduct the experiments that he was doing, they would have tossed his ass out.
They would have.
Right? So, are you with me so far?
I'm with you. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
So, when you think about it from just the traditional magic perspective and community of believers, those three things, divination, will, and theurgy, have scientific correlations. But before we get to those scientific correlations, let's talk about the correlation that they have with religion.
Please.
Religion uses divination, right?
How so?
Well, how about when you pray?
Oh, yeah. You could say that's almost like, I think Rocky asked earlier, is praying magic? And I think the answer is probably yes.
Well, think about it from just a fundamental aspect of what the act is. You're thinking a thought, and you are trying to intend that thought to become something. To go, you're trying to see in the future. What did the prophets do? They were divining. Now you can take the story that they were getting a download. Okay, fine. I get downloads all the time. Half of them I'm like, I don't know where that came from. I'm not eating that anymore.
Right.
And the other half of the time it's like, am I supposed to be paying attention to that?
Now, from your definition, wouldn't prayer be more akin to theurgy because you're trying to get something done and you're asking God's help in it?
Well, prayer is the vehicle. Where you're pointing it is whether it's divination, will, or theurgy.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes good sense.
Now, the interesting thing about the religious side and these different belief systems is, with the exception of Jainism, Taoism, and Buddhism, although there are some correlations, there are some aspects of each that kind of fall into this category. But for the most part, those belief systems, and I'm a Taoist. I became a Taoist back in 96, I guess. So about 23 years. And that was after my Christian ministry and doing my spiritual search, trying to find something that defined the resonance and the experience that I was having so that I could say, aha, that helps me understand what it is. I know what I'm experiencing, but if I just take the definitions from, say, Christianity, which is where I started, and I say, now tell me what your system is and how does it explain my experience? And at first, I was in a Pentecostal church. We laid hands on the sick, spoke in tongues, and did the whole devil thing and all that. There was some pretty profound experiences that I went, whoa, these guys are on it. they've got some serious answers to some of the questions I have. But when I get into something, I don't go head first or feet first. I do a jackknife and I get in there and start, doing the backstroke underwater, trying to figure out what's going on and gathering as much as I can. So I got into prophecy. I spent, it was close to 2 years, 3 or 4 nights a week, Bible studies that I ran on prophecy. So we went through Ezekiel and Isaiah and Daniel and Revelation, and all the minors and majors. And like, what are these guys talking about? And how did they get that information? And is any of the information been validated? What's the provenance of that data? Is it the real story, or was it mangled up along the way and I'm only getting part of it? So I'm not seeing enough to ask enough questions. Went through all that shit, and the more questions I had, the more answers I got were, you just got to believe, and it's just got to be faith. And I said, I can't do that.
Nope, can't do that.
Can't do it. Sorry. I mean, especially the further down the road I went, the more nuggets I found and picked them up and went, oh, well, look, these two fit. I went, well, okay, so your shit was bullshit because I found some information here that makes sense. And most importantly, as I said, I was trying to find something that resonated and gave me some definition of my own personal internal experience from my mental magic. So when I found, I went through a bunch of them, finally left them all and said, I'm just not going to look. I'm just going to let it find me. So I actually in '86, I became a shiatsu practitioner. That's how I met my wife and the mother of my children. And we had to study Chinese meridian theory, TCM.
Now, I'm assuming they're the same person.
Yes, I have been married twice, but unlike some people, I have children from one, and we all survived, and that's the most important thing. We're all still alive. But anyway, I said, I'm not going to pay any attention. I got to let it find me. And in the 90s, she went through a number of medical issues, and we went back to our original teachings in Chinese derived medicine and philosophy, and tried to get away from the allopathic, because I've been anti-allopathic since I can remember going to the first doctor to get a shot, which I can't. I mean, they drew blood back in the 80s for marriage licenses. I don't think they do that anymore. And they took my blood. I was out, gone. I just can't do the needle thing.
Oh my,
it's not a good thing. So when she went through her medical issues, we went back to started looking at the Chinese medicine and belief system. And I started taking Tai Chi, and I started studying the I Ching and the art of war. And I found a mentor, and the next thing I knew, I was a Tai Chi instructor, and I was totally into Taoism, because it gave me an experience and a definition of my experience in a way that felt natural. There's no hierarchy of anything. There is just the being, the yin and the yang, the flow, the being in what the New Agers call the now or the present.
Right.
But being aware of the past and the future, because the future is when you think about it, the future is always what's now. Because what I just said a few seconds ago is in the past.
Absolutely.
Right. So you're actually always living in the future with the knowledge of the now. And there's nobody telling you that you got two choices, up or down, if you screwed up on the way out. I couldn't. That seemed to be such an overt psychological control mechanism, and it had seriously screwed me up for a long time, that when I found that I didn't have to adhere to that structure, to that future, that I could be here in the now and be me and try to figure out that before I screwed up myself or anyone going forward, it was like, it was so liberating. It was unbelievable. And then there's also the aspects of the Chinese philosophy of things like Tai Chi and Qigong, which are incredibly beneficial physically.
Oh,
and
tremendously so.
And I don't see anything like that coming out of the Christians, except maybe the Seventh-day Adventists, who got this whole, nutrition thing going on. But anyway, I don't know how we got onto that, but
it's so true, Robert, because I just was about a month ago, I guess I came across this, and you know this term Christ. We always just accept it, Christ, 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 Christ. It means a person, it means a thing, Christ consciousness, blah blah blah. But I finally started and looked at the original Greek word, and what Christ means is it means anointing, consecration, or flow.
Mm-hmm.
And we've allowed them, the religious powers that be, to externalize this thing to a Christ figure, when really it is an internal anointing, internal consecration, and an internal flow, which is very analogous to what you're speaking of with the Tao.
I totally agree, and I think that one of the it's a curse and a blessing. You have to look at things and realize that there's usually, regardless of how bad something might be, there's probably something that's not so bad on it. My philosophy is there is no positive and negative. There's only positive, because the realization of a negative is a positive event or reaction. But when you think about particularly the Western religions, Islam and all of the variants of Islam, which there are many, and the many variants of Christianity, on one hand, they're extremely good in that they cover some very fundamental aspects of morality and ethics, and they're highly screwed up, going different directions within their own sides, but it's very superficial. And I think that, at least at a minimum, for people who need to have some kind of moral compass, some type of foundation of ethics in which they can conduct themselves in some kind of harmony with the rest of their fellow carbon-based units that they're floating around with, that's a good thing. But the bad thing is it's just, not only is it superficial, they're hiding the really good stuff,
Right.
about being a human, about being spiritual, about being a conscious contributor in a positive way to humanity, to yourself to begin with. And then they throw in all these rules and hierarchies and people and stuff, and you got to pray to this one for that, and you can only eat this then, and you can't do this with them, and regardless if you both agree. I mean, it's like, okay, look, there's too many rules, and a lot of them are contradictory to the biological, natural, inherent function of the human being. So you're putting some, I can get the whole thing about being able to have discipline and keep yourself from doing certain things and developing yourself in a more positive way, spiritually, mentally, or physically. That's a good thing. But if it's not doing you or anybody else any good, you might want to rethink it. You might want to stop and check it out and see if it's worth the amount of energy and effort you're putting into it. And by God, at a minimum, make sure you keep your emotions intact, because emotions are the things that drive people insane. You don't see a lot of Buddhists running around, or Taoists or Zen, or you don't see these people running around trying to take over somebody else's place and tell them how to live, work, think, and do. And that's because there is no hierarchy. There's only harmony.
Right. But now, like the Chinese government officials, people that are running China, well, are they Taoist type people, or are they psychopaths like the rest of the people that run things?
Well, when the communists took over, it became mostly an atheist nation.
Right.
But did you hear recently, over this last few weeks, there's this Muslim sect called the Uyghurs.
I've heard of that. There's
like 2 million of them. And the Chinese have rounded them all up and put them into concentration camps.
Mm.
Now, this just the news of it, it's been coming out for a while, but this last weekend, there was a big story about it. And people are trying to figure out, well, what does it mean? The Chinese, the way the communist government runs the atheist state and belief system, I mean, they keep an eye on everybody.
Right.
Not even thinking about the religious side of it, but the religious side is where they keep a real good eye on people. So, you being a Christian over there for a long time was a serious problem. You had to be in the closet,
right,
underground. But the Muslim, they've gotten pretty cranked up about these guys, because it's interesting that when you look at different belief systems, you have your radicals of extreme thought and taking things to an extreme on any religion that has a hierarchy.
Exactly. You don't have many Taoist extremists, though, do you?
That's what I'm saying. You don't see Buddhists and Taoists out running around going, yeah, I want to move in and create my little community, and you guys can't wear bikinis and
Yeah.
you can't eat this on that. It's like you don't see that.
I guess the worst thing they ever do is like set themselves on fire, right?
Well, those are again some extremists, but they're not trying to take over anybody, but their own body,
It's very, very interesting. It really is.
right? So anytime you have a hierarchical structure, particularly that has some testosterone-based patriarchal unit at the head of it, you got some issues. And when you think about, was it? I'm not sure whose quote this is, but they said, atheism, people who don't believe in any particular belief system or hierarchy, is just another theology with one less God.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? Science, I think, has become a theology.
Oh, absolutely.
They have elevated themselves to a status that is worthy of, taking a very. Well, I'm not going to say that one. It was a good joke. Taking a Sanders out of your Ocasio-Cortez. Let's put it that way.
There we go.
I had to say that's for you, Brother Rocky. But when you think about it, the hierarchical setup in the way that these belief systems are structured is nothing more than to control the people, the sheeple or the sleeple. Right?
Absolutely. All the sleeple. That's a great term.
So what they're doing is they're trying to control that mental magic. They're taking the ability of thought and individualism, this whole thing on identity politics. I mean, watching these people who are pushing these extreme social, I think it falls into the social justice category. I mean, if any of them step back for 5 minutes and listen to themselves, or people within their same ideological grouping, and they listen to themselves objectively, I think it might take 2 or 3 sessions, but they'd probably go, what the hell am I talking about?
Exactly. What am I trying to say? Because it makes no sense.
It's blather that is emotionally driven. And when you get endorphins and dopamine all mixing and running around in the cranium, which is, where the neuronic firing of electrical stimuli and energy is occurring, that stuff affects the consciousness. The consciousness in the mind is not seated in the brain. The brain is the electrical organ, if you will, of the biological system, and consciousness floats all over the place within it. We tend to think of it as it's centered within the head and within the brain. But I think that there's more and more science, as well as this is where you start seeing these nuggets come together, where esoteric and exoteric information and knowledge start bleeding over into science. And what we're saying today is, the definitive word on reality and existence. You start getting into quantum mechanics and special relativity. You have this thing called entanglement, right?
Right.
So you've got entanglement where it doesn't matter how far apart these two things are, they instantaneously, which is faster than the speed of light, which, oh shit, I guess nothing can go faster than the speed of light theory has got some issues that needs to be readdressed. But you have this immediate interaction via this connection. That's what's known in Taoism as the Tao. And in fact, in the Tao, there's nothing that can be described as the Tao, and it will be the Tao. So it's like the best way, I think, for me, the way I look at it is it's the fundamental essence within which consciousness and energy exist.
Nice to see you, Green Greg. So I have to check out your channel. Yeah, that's fascinating, Robert. It's fascinating. It really is.
So now let's try to pull this into some of the Atlantis side and see where some of these things go. Let me make sure there's nothing else. I'll mention a couple of things just to kind of give some content within the context. When we talk about mental magic, it's something that we've established that has some conscious energetic existence that, depending on where the intent of that energy and consciousness is focused, will either be a good thing or it will be a bad thing, or it'll just be something down the middle of the road. Like, I'd like to get up this morning at this time and I'd like to get my day started in this order. Done. People don't realize that and this is where Tony Robbins, The Secret, the law of attraction, and I think the law of attraction missed it only because the fundamental aspect of attraction is intent. So I think the law of intent comes before the law of attraction.
Absolutely. I would agree.
So that intent is mental magic. You have both the dark arts and you have the light arts as they're defined now in religious belief systems, both of them using the exact same thing. They call it different, they manage it differently, they mitigate it differently, they manifest it differently. But there's all of them are doing the exact same thing. So there's a bridge of some essence of what things are between both the dark and the light as far as it relates to magic. The whole key is the intention. So when you're looking at all these ancient mystery schools, talk about that before we get into Atlantis and the stuff going on down in Cuba. And we're going to have CAYCE tied into that. But you've got the Kabbalah. You have all of this positive thinking. You have gnosis, which is one of my favorite words, which is something that I found through my experience with the Tao. And gnosis is the Greek word for knowledge, to know, but it's a deeper level than to know. You can know something that I've got a light on, I'm sitting here talking to you, and I've got a mic in front of me. I know that. But gnosis is something that you feel in your bones.
Yes.
It's something that the Freemasons, the Templars, all the various esoteric Rosicrucians,
Rosicrucians, yeah.
Right. These guys are keepers of this knowledge, and the Essenes and so forth. As I mentioned, the Kabbalah, you have all of these different aspects of people at different times and different cultures aware of this knowledge. And it was so profound and powerful that it had to be kept, it had to be managed, it had to be protected. And you wouldn't let some of this stuff out on the masses, because as Rocky and I have talked about, and talks about, what about the power of the mind? It's so, why can't we just turn people onto the power of the mind? Well, a lot of people ain't, number one, they ain't ready for it. Number two, it may make a mess.
And could you imagine what some people would do if they instantaneously had the power of the mind? You've now got the power of the mind. Oh, that tickles me to death. Well, dead. I mean, that's a ridiculous example, but it's true.
It's fundamental, and it's exactly what would happen. And I think this is why
I'm not going to hand my 5-year-old a Glock 22 loaded up with 14, 40 millimeter bullets either.
And this is where, completely agree. This is where the mystery schools, Masons, all the people that we mentioned, the Templars, all that, the religious belief systems, Western Christianity, Islam, and including the Buddhists, the Taoists, and others from India. I got to tell you, I think some of the most fascinating and most revealing information and knowledge about life is going to come out of China and India and that whole Southeast Asia.
Those ancient cultures are going to teach us a lot of things. I know they will. I agree with you.
Right. And so this word gnosis, just to try to get back to that, my marbles are bouncing around. Gnosis is something I said that you feel in your bones.
Right.
It's not just something that you know in your mind or that you have metrics for. And by the way, hashtag metrics matter. Anytime you want to check anything out, start with the metrics. Keep the emotions and everything out. Just look at the numbers, look at the math, and figure out how something is measured.
Absolutely.
And then apply that to whatever the subject matter is, and get the metrics of that subject matter. And then you can stand back and you can go, oh, look at that. And you'll find your journey through something that could be traumatic emotionally or psychologically a lot easier to navigate and to get to the other side. So the metrics, but you've got this mental magic going on in the esoterics and exoteric. You've got your mental magic going on in the belief systems. You got mental magic going on in science. Because think about quantum mechanics or general relativity. Think about string theory. while some aspects of different experiments and different continued tests and studies have seemed to indicate that from the mathematical projections, there appears to be something to this string theory thing. There appears to be something to this, to the collider and being able to find the Higgs boson. There's something to that we can demonstrate this quantum entanglement. We can't really explain it. We can kind of observe it, but we have this mathematical formula that kind of helps us at least see what we think is going on.
But then we change it when we see it. So,
right? Good old Niels Bohr. And when they went to Einstein back in 28 Sloving, they said, look, we got a problem here. You know, all this stuff is great, but as soon as somebody's watching it, it goes sideways. So the observer effect was born. So now you have all of these same things going on between the mystery schools, between magic, between religion, between science. They're all using the same fundamental aspects to define each other, to define one another, to poo-poo one another, because there's a big battle on just what reality and consciousness is between all of them. Some of it's overt, some of them don't care. They just go, I got the answer, I'm not listening to you.
right.
But they're all using the same fundamental tenet of mental magic to come up with things, to figure out what, you know, you think about science, when they come up with these formulas and these definitions of the universe and the materium, what's been affectionately referred to as reductionist materialism, they want to get it down to the physical level. Everything else, anything that is non-physical, even though radio waves, the electromagnetic spectrum is non-visible, it is physical.
It is.
Right? But anything that they can't measure is not applicable to whatever the subject is. So if you say, I can use the will of my mind to go see something across time and space, something like remote viewing. Remote viewing is fundamentally a part of the natural consciousness psyche that we all have. Because in some way, shape, or form, just about every human has had a psychic phenomenon experience in the form of clairvoyance, being able to be clairaudient, to hear something, to know that something. Here's a good example. You ever been out in a crowd somewhere, or maybe in a room with several other people, and you have this sense that somebody's looking at you? Everybody has that experience.
Absolutely. We've all felt that.
So why is that? If you can't see somebody looking at you, yet you have a sense that somebody is looking at you, and then you validate it by turning around, what do you call that? What is science? Where do they put that? In the paranormal, parapsychology realm of phenomenon that is seen but not understood and nor explained?
They'd probably just write it off to coincidence.
Or, you know, and then that's one of the things about the whole, you know, invisible being in the sky thing. It's like, if you can't explain everything, it's his fault, right?
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, well, all you're doing, you're being intellectually weak. You're deciding that you know, okay, I'll take that answer for now because I got to pour this drink over here and that meat is on the grill.
Absolutely.
And you go, well, yeah, but I'll tell you what, I can do both. I can sit there and think about it, and I can get the drink and get the meat, and I can sit there. That's why Rocky is so awesome, because I know that half the time we're sitting there talking to him, he's thinking about that cigar, that drink, and a nice big old piece of meat on the grill.
And you better have all three of those things ready when Cynthia and I come to Minnesota. That's all I got to say.
I think it's going to come.
Yeah, we'll be up there in the next within 6 to 8 weeks, I think.
Well, at some point I got to get up there because I've only seen him on a digital representation, and I think there's a good possibility he might be deep fake. I don't think that's really Rocky sometimes. I think he's got one of those massive quantum computers, and it's a projection. that's so well programmed. And, well, sometimes there's obviously glitches in his program.
Yeah. Well, I have met the meatball, Robert. I have physically met the meatball, so I can vouch that there is a true meatball. I don't know, maybe the one that you're seeing. I'm not saying there couldn't be a cloned meatball, because I mean, if you're going to clone somebody, Rocky's a good candidate, but I have met the original meatball at least.
Can you imagine an army of Stoochies? I mean,
No, I cannot.
You know, I think that would take some time to train them, you know, so that they'd all kind of, because you know what happened, you'd have a dozen of them and they'd all like this, you'd be chasing them all over the place.
Yeah, but can you ever really have too many meatballs, Robert? Think about it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever run into that limit.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that situation when there's too many meatballs. But Rocky says there's only one, but hey, and I have to agree with that. Only one original meatball. The original meatball. That's another T-shirt for you, Rocky.
Yeah, absolutely. Hell, I might even wear that one.
Yeah, I have on the way, even as we speak, a Meatball Army T-shirt is headed to the undisclosed location here in the Heartland. So
yeah, I need to get my order in for one of those mugs. It's getting to be summer where I'm at, and clothes, we just don't wear them here. So
absolutely, I know what you're saying.
If I got the shirt, I'd have to just put it in the closet, and maybe I'd hang it on the wall in my bedroom and just kind
there
of
you go,
admire it, man.
Admire it, exactly. Robert, we have to have you back on because we ran out of time, and we still have a lot of material.
Well, we've got, that's right, we're just getting into the Atlantis connection with CAYCE and the hot zone down there. But I think we covered the old magic mystery school religion side of it pretty well. So thank you very much.
We covered it up one side and down the other. And seriously, I would like to get you back on to finish this up for sure. If you're not, over there at Rocky's all the time, every time I go on Rocky's show, you're there.
Every time I turn around, he's like, "Look, man, everybody else bailed. Can you save me one more time?"
Rocky used to have me on a lot until he met you. I'm kidding. Well, but just amazing information, and we get so much, I call it, into silliness. We're talking about this and that and things that don't matter and things that might happen, things that could happen, things we're afraid are going to happen. But even if all those things, if we're experts on all those things that could happen, and we're not good here, it doesn't matter if we know all that. But conversely, if we got this down and we've got our inner peace and we know our divinity, our sovereignty, our freedom, it doesn't really matter what else happens out there.
I think that's one of the most fundamental points that is important to me in this long scattered road of stuff that we covered. There's a fundamental component of existence that drives and can be very productive if you're aware of it and it's harnessed correctly. And that's this mental magic, this consciousness, because you can't, if with all the shit that's going to go on around you, everything is going to come at you, whether you see it coming or you don't. It's how you think about what it is and your reaction to it that determines the outcome, whether it's going to be something that's positive or something that's negative. And right now, there is so much shit being slung across the walls. I mean, it's like you walk into a room, and remember that those secret agent, the James Bond movie where they had all the lasers, right, coming in order, and you had to do all this shit to get around just to get to the safe. I think that is the way a lot of people feel when they just step outside, let alone getting online on, some platform or social media and chat and trying to make sense out of stuff. It's like, damn, they're coming in from all angles. It's like incoming, and you just go, where's that off knob? Off. And
if you get through all that, Robert, and you get to the safe and the safe's empty, how disappointing would that be? You got to have something in that safe, cousins. Hey, how can people find out about your information, Robert, and your teachings and lessons? How can they learn more from the professor?
Right now, the main place that I have, I'm also a voiceover artist, and I'm setting up my own podcast. I'm going to launch it this month, actually, called The Nexus, and all of that is at Bauer.media. So there's one page on the voiceover work, and then at the top you'll see the Nexus Nextcast podcast, and that's where the rest of the shows and information. I've got the shows on the Situation Room up there. I've got a whole bunch of amazing guests coming up over the next 60 days.
Excellent.
So some new shows, and that's where you'll find most of what I'm going to be doing, because I got to tell you what, I look around at all the mistakes I've made, and I've learned so much. I think I'm going to make some more.
Absolutely. And that's the only way to learn, is to not be afraid to make mistakes.
Well, mistakes are the best teacher I have found. I tell you what, I've talked to some successful people and I've aspired to what they tried to, how they went down their path and what they tried to do. But you talk to them one-on-one, they're like, when I went through this course over here, I didn't think I would come out the other side.
Yeah.
But it's like, what was it? Churchill said, when you're going through hell, just keep going.
Just keep going, because there's only one way through sometimes, and that's through.
That's right. That's right. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on, Jeff.
Robert, I appreciate it so much. Please sit there for 1 second so I can say goodbye to you personally. To those of you in the chat room, I salute you for being here, seeking after truth. And of course, this is the invasion of D-Day. What a great generation that was. So we want to certainly remember all those brave men and women that served their countries and fought and died for ideals. And, wouldn't it be nice if we could, it's nice to have ideals that you can fight and die for, but how about some ideals that we could love and live for?
Amen. Amen.
Let's find some of those, huh?
If you look for those instead of the other, you'll probably find more of them. And what a wonderful life that would be.
Absolutely. For Robert Bauer, the professor, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. So nice to see you, and we'll see you all again real soon.